Hi, I'm Dr. Libby Wilson, and I'm author of The Path of Intention, 5 Habits to Optimize Your Health and Create a Life You Love. And this is the Living the Next Chapter podcast. That is exactly right. And that is like the way we describe it in our book. I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I'm so glad you brought this one up because I think sleep is often overlooked. You know, we think about, diet and exercise seem to be like the two that everybody goes to when it comes to health. And I think sleep is one of the most undervalued things that you can do for your health. You know, I talk to people, fatigue is like the thing I see people for the most. I mean, that is one of my specialty areas is helping people manage fatigue. And that can be from mitochondrial ill health and adrenal ill health and hormones being imbalanced. But the thing that is the first thing to think about is, are you getting enough sleep? And, 7 hours sleep per night is the minimum you need for health. And sometimes people need more than that. But anything less than that, and yes, you're going to be tired because your body is not getting the restoration that it needs at nighttime. And, I used to be a person who, the biggest compliment you could have ever given me would have been like, man, that Libby is one tough, pretty gal, and like as a resident, we worked these really long hours and all night and into the next day. And I liked to brag about that. I thought it was pretty tough that I was able to do that. And I also like to brag about, going to bed late and getting up early because I'm such a hard charging gal that this is what I do, right? Like this is kind of a badge of honor in our culture in some ways, right? And now I absolutely don't want to be that person. I want to be the person who does do exercise and does do hard things, but not at the expense of good sleep. And so you need quantity of sleep, minimum of 7 hours. And if someone comes to me and they're tired, I'm like asking them, like, are you getting 7 hours? Because if you aren't, this is the very first place that we need to start, And then also ensuring that sleep is high quality. How deep is the sleep that we're getting?
Okay, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have the doctor here with us, and I always like saying this. The doctor will see us now. Dr. Libby Wilson is here with us. Nice to have you here. Welcome to Living the Next Chapter. So excited to have the doctor here. We have no wait time. We're right in to see the doctor, so welcome to the podcast.
Yes, how often does that happen, right?
Right? I know, this is awesome. This is really exciting. Nice to have you here. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me today, Dave. Great to be here.
So the little behind the scenes, we've already had a little chat, and I walked away from our time together, kind of talking about the podcast and about today, so inspired by speaking with you. I love your spirit. I love what you're all about, and I love your journey. And I would like to kind of get into a little bit of that today and talk about your author journey, but also your medical journey and kind of the path that you've been on. It's inspiring to see how you've changed from one area of working medically and now how you're helping people in a different way and in a similar way, I guess. But it's great to have you part of the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'd love to kind of share my journey with you. I was thinking before I came on the podcast, and I thought of something that I don't think I've shared before was in the 5th grade, we had career day and we had to choose our career. And I chose author back then. And I had kind of forgotten about that because it was a few years after that I had gotten the idea in my head about becoming a doctor. And I think it had happened because I was really good in math and really good in science. And I was one of those kids who got good grades. And somebody along the way, a trusted role model and a parent said, oh, you should be a doctor. And I thought, yes, that's a great idea. I should be a doctor. And so the author dream kind of got pushed aside and I decided I wanted to become a doctor. And all eggs in that basket, I am just really focused on the goal. And, I went to medical school, I think for a couple of reasons. One was because I thought I was smart enough to do it. And that's what I thought I was supposed to do. But secondly, I thought I was going to help people be. I really thought that was a cool thing. And I was pretty passionate about learning how to do that. And what I realized in medical school is I learned a lot. I really learned a lot about sickness and how to diagnose sickness and then how to match prescription medications to the sicknesses that we had diagnosed. So I became really good at diagnosing illness and controlling them with pharmaceutical drugs, which is super necessary. And I'm super glad that there are doctors who love to do that. But it wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. Like I thought, oh no, I want to help people really optimize their health and be healthy. And truthfully, in medical school, I didn't learn a ton about that. And then the system wasn't really set up with the time to really dive into those topics with people. It's kind of like fast paced, right? You know, you gotta see a lot of patients, and it's a high volume, and we keep the patients waiting because we're seeing so many and stuff. And so there was a lot I liked about it, but there was a lot that just didn't feel like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And so a few years ago, I shifted my focus and created an optimal health, functional medicine, holistic practice that I now do. And along that journey, I also became an author and wrote my first book.
It's amazing. Like, I know when I go to see my family doctor, I love him. He's a great guy. He's been with us through all of our children growing up. He's a super kind person. And yes, we wait a lot in the waiting room because he likes to talk to his patients. Yeah. But when you finally get into the room and you're waiting for him to come in, it feels like speed dating. It feels like you have him for one thing. You can only talk to him about one thing one thing you want to address. He doesn't want to hear everything. And that's another appointment. Right. And you get him for a few minutes and then he's gone. And you're like, okay, I have a prescription and I have to come back next time. And you're like, that's it? Like, I don't know how, like he's obviously got all his information in the computer, but he just seems to know everything and remember everything about you. But I just wish I had more time to talk about my health. I wish I had more time to go a little deeper than just, why am I here? Here's a prescription, off you go. And that seems to be the normal doctor-patient relationship. And for me as a patient, I don't feel like I get good quality time with him. Yeah, I get like several minutes, right? And is that kind of how you were feeling from a doctor's perspective? That you were just seeing people?
Exactly. And as you're sharing that story, I'm wondering if your doctor might feel the same way that you feel too, because I certainly did. Like I had 2,500 patients in my family practice, and I knew them all. Like I knew all of their names. As a matter of fact, sometimes I'd look at my schedule and I would see a name I didn't recognize, and I would ask my nurse. I'd say, who's this person? Like I don't know that person. And oftentimes it was one of the other physicians in the practice's patient, and they had put them on the wrong schedule, because I could recognize their names. I knew them. I remembered a lot about them, and I cared about them. But there was always this constant pressure of the only way you could successfully run the business was to see a lot of patients. And then, of course, patients, one of their biggest complaints is like, oh my goodness, the doctor keeps me waiting for so long because they have to fill in all these patients. And so you're trying to hurry to not keep the other ones waiting, and knowing that you have to see as many as you need to just to cover the overhead, and all of that. And then I also think there's it's a weird dynamic, really, the doctor-patient insurance company dynamic, because there's really not too many other situations where you have a relationship with someone. So you're choosing, to see that provider, like, it's a business and you're choosing to go to that business, right? But then the person paying the bill is somebody else. And this person paying the bill has a lot of say in what's happening in the situation. There's certain things that the insurance company needs you to document to pay for the visit. And what the insurance company needs you to document isn't necessarily the things that you as a patient care about. And it's oftentimes not what the doctor thinks that is important for you either, but it's kind of the primary focus of the visit, because without that, no one gets paid. Without anybody getting paid, there is no business, right? So it's just a really interesting dynamic. And I think all of the physicians that I know that practice in the conventional system, like sometimes in the beginning, they're like, this is great. But as time goes on, I don't know too many that are really like loving the system, just like you as a patient are like, yeah, I like the doctor and he's really good. And, I haven't left. You've been with them for a long time, right? So you must be overall pleased. But truth be told, there are some things that you would like to be different. I think that's how most physicians feel too.
So for you as a doctor, was it a matter of time, like over a span of time, that you started to feel that you were heading in a different direction? Or was it a get up one Monday morning and you're like, wait a minute, what am I doing? I'm going to make a change. How did that all happen for you?
I think it was sort of both. I mean, I think underneath the surface, there was this like discontent that I felt like I needed to do something different for a long time. But I do remember kind of one specific day that I thought I am going to do something different. And it was a morning several years ago, and I was at CrossFit. So I love to exercise. I've always been a pretty avid exerciser. And so I was at the CrossFit gym, like 5:30 a.m. class, and I was going to be at work seeing patients at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I remember there was a poster that the gym owner had hung up, and it was new. It wasn't the last time I was there, and it caught my attention. And it said, the 5 factors of health: diet, exercise, sleep, mindset, and nutrition, or mindset and relationships were the 5 factors. And it seemed so obvious to me. And I realized in that moment, yeah, this is what I do to try to take care of my own self and my own health. But yet, in a couple of hours, I'm going to go to the office and I'm going to see 30 patients, and I'm going to hand out prescription after prescription after prescription. And I'm going to spend very little time talking about these things that I know are the key to health. And I felt like, you know what, I'm going to find a different way. And I wasn't sure in that moment yet what that different way was going to look like, but I was 100% convinced that I was going to figure out a way to deliver the kind of care that I wanted to deliver, the kind of things that I was doing for my own self, that I wanted to deliver that to my patients as well. And it was also during this time that I was taking some continuing education classes in functional medicine, which was something I had never heard about before. Like when I was going through my conventional training, you go through 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and then you choose your residency, and your residency is in your specialty. So that could be, for me, it was family medicine, but it could have been internal medicine or surgery or OBGYN or pediatrics or dermatology or whatever you would have chosen, right? When I was choosing family practice, functional medicine wasn't like on the menu. I'd never heard of it, and it really wasn't until my daughter, who was, just a little kid at the time, was having some stomach problems that I couldn't figure out the solution for. So I put my family doctor hat on and I said, oh, I think this is irritable bowel, and I put the medicines for that, and it didn't really work. And then I took her to see one of my colleagues, thinking maybe I'm just a little bit too emotionally attached here to see the clear picture. When it's somebody you love that much, sometimes it's a little hard to be unbiased. And so I took her in to see one of my colleagues, and same assessment that I had come up with, and we tried some different medicines and they didn't work. And then we saw a specialist, and the pediatric gastroenterologist did a whole bunch of testing and couldn't figure it out either. And that prompted me to take a class in functional medicine. And guess what? I took this 3-day online weekend seminar about stomach issues from a functional medicine perspective, and I figured out right away what she had. And it was something I had never heard of in all the training that I had received up to that point. It was a brand new concept to me. And I ordered a test for her to confirm the diagnosis I suspected. And then I was able to treat it with some dietary modifications and some natural supplements, and it went away. And it was really mind blowing to me. So I was kind of on this journey with her. And then this poster got hung up at the gym, and I'm on this journey of trying to take care of myself. And I thought, this is going to be the answer. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to start taking steps to figure out how to create the practice of my dream that I know there are patients out there looking for this type of care too.
I think I probably would have stolen the poster, to be quite honest. I would have taken it with me. That's a moment in time, right? The sign is on the wall. It's right there.
It really is. You know what's interesting? As I delved deeper into my functional medicine training, functional medicine ascribes to 5 modifiable lifestyle factors, which are those exact same factors that were on that poster in the gym. And fast forward a couple of years later, the gym owner that hung the poster is the co-author that I wrote my book.
Wait a minute.
So we were like, oh my gosh, like CrossFit and what you as a personal trainer are talking to your clients about are the same thing as a functional medicine doctor that I'm talking to my clients about. Let's put our heads together and, create a book. And that was my book.
Wow. I didn't even put those two together, even based on our conversation before. And I saw the authors listed for the book and I'm like, okay. I don't know who the other person is, but I know who you are.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the response for the book.
Yes.
Like you put it out in the world. What are you hearing back from people as they read?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of great feedback from the book. The book is kind of a guide. It's called The Path of Intention, 5 Habits to Optimize Your Health and Create a Life You Love. And it's a book that kind of meets anybody where they're at. I mean, so you could be like an elite CrossFit athlete and gain insights from the book, or you could be someone who is like on the couch and knowing you need to exercise, but really hate exercise and not wanting to move and, eating McDonald's and Wendy's every day and still benefit from the book too, because, we give you some assessment tools of how to evaluate where you're at. And then based on where you're at, some action steps that you can take to move the needle forward in the right direction. Right. So I think about, we're all on a path headed somewhere. That could be an automatic default path that we're not really conscious of, or it could be a very intentional path that we are proactively taking steps on every day. And I like to sort of shift that focus into the consciousness so that we know where we want to be going and we can take small little steps regularly to get there. And I tell my patients this, like, I'm not perfect. Like I eat a lot of good food. I exercise. I try to get good, and I try to do all these things. But I'm a human being and I like to have a little bit of fun too. One of my little weaknesses is I love sweets, like double stuffed Oreos for whatever reason. Like when those are in my house, I really have a hard time saying no to them.
Okay.
But what I tell people are not every single step needs to be forward. It's just more steps forward than backwards and you're moving in the right direction. I've done this before where I'm like all steps forward, like 30 days, no sugar, 75 days, no sugar, really extreme things. And then what do I do on day 31 or the day after is I really blow it, and I go nuts. And so instead of doing that now, I think, what kind of changes can I make that I can stick with consistently for the long term? And that's going to mean having some balance in my life. It's going to mean having some treats and not making that be a big fail. That's just part of it, just factoring that in. And that's what we try to do in the book too. We talk about, there's 2 fictional couples in the book that we follow throughout this entire journey. We introduce them at the beginning and then follow them all the way through until they're well past retirement in their late years of life. And one couple, Jake and Emma, they do the hard right things pretty consistently. From a young age, they're doing these modifiable lifestyle factors, and we call it making deposits into their health bank account. And then their neighbors, Bob and Carol, try. They want to do the right things. They see Jake and Emma, and they see Jake and Emma doing what they're doing, and they make attempts to mimic that. But something always gets in the way. And when they seem like very small differences early on, but when you take those differences and compound them over years, the results are pretty different.
Interesting. Well, the sponsor for today's episode is actually McDonald's and Oreo. So that's interesting. But I'm so we've already given them a little shout out, which is great. No, we're not sponsored by them.
You want to hear something funny? Let me tell you a really quick story. I did, I love exercise, so I have done a couple of Ironman triathlons in my life. And I did one in Chattanooga, Tennessee, I think 2016. The sponsor of the Ironman was Little Debbie snack cakes. I am not joking. I have this big flag in my gym in my basement, and it's like Iron Man, Chattanooga, Little Debbie. I just find it to be so funny because
that's very ironic. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that just doesn't seem. Yeah, something just doesn't seem to go together there.
That was that's poor planning. Okay, so let's take the stethoscope off for a second. Let's put on the author hat for a second. Tell me about that. Like you mentioned, like early on, that was being an author was a thing for you when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
When the idea of writing came up, did you have any sense of like, who am I to write a book? Like, obviously you have the education and all the knowledge and the expertise to write a book, but being an author and sitting down and actually putting pen to paper or getting on your computer and writing, was there any moment for you where you're like, can I really do this? Can I really write this book?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think every new thing I've tried, whether it's something in the fitness realm or work related, professional related, there's always that sense of doubt. There's a little bit of that imposter syndrome, I think, that we all struggle with a little bit. And I think what really got me moving on this project was my co-author. So Nate, who I worked out with in the gym, like I had mentioned to him multiple times, I'm going to write a book one day. I'm going to write a book one day. And it's so easy, like one day never comes, right? So when is the one day? And he had, said, yeah, I think I might want to write a book one day too. But I remember like he kind of was the one that was like, let's do this. He hit me up and he said, Libby, I've got this idea. I want to write this book. You want to do it together? And I think having someone that was sort of depending on me too was maybe the impetus that got me really moving. But then the big question that came up for me is like, when do I write a book, right? So I'm creating this new practice. I'm a wife and I've got 2 teenage daughters, that are very active. And so I've got a lot of hats that I'm wearing, and how am I going to find the time to write a book? But one of my superpowers is consistency. And I realized I didn't have 6 or 8 hours a day to sit down at my computer and write a book. But what I could carve out were a few hours every week, and I could show up consistently and see, there wasn't a hurry. This wasn't like an urgent deadline that needed to be completed in 90 days. It was just making those small little deposits on a regular basis and seeing where it took me. And so I tried to plan out about 3 hours per week, and I just blocked it on my calendar kind of before I opened up all the emails and the messages and all of the, things that needed to catch my attention. And I just would devote that time. And then lots of times it would be like, oh my gosh, I'm really on a roll here. I want to keep writing, but I have an appointment or I have something else I have to attend to. And so I would just stop and the next time pick it back up again. And I am so shocked at how easy it really was when I just allowed myself that devoted time consistently. And then the other thing that was a little challenging was we weren't exactly sure how to co-author a book. At first, we weren't sure who's going to write what and how are we going to do this. And I will say the intro chapters were the hardest, because we were trying to figure that out. But once we got into the meat of the book, it really became very easy. And we naturally developed this method of where I kind of define the factor and from a doctor's standpoint say why this is important, like why sleep's important and why we need to be focusing on this and prioritizing it. And then Nate was really good at the action plan, kind of coming up with the how do you evaluate where you are and what steps do you take. And it was pretty cool because the way we worked together on writing a book is very similar to the way I work together with patients, because I am I order the labs, I interpret them, I come up with a plan for the patient. I call it a strategy session. And then I have a health coach that kind of holds the patient's hand and helps them implement what we've agreed upon. And so in writing the book, it was sort of the same way. I kind of come up with the knowledge and how to interpret that. And then he took over and kind of helped people figure out how to implement that. And so it was getting started, I think, was the biggest obstacle. That was the biggest obstacle. Yeah. And then trying to figure out how can you incorporate all this into all the other things that you already do without letting that all go by the
Yeah.
wayside.
That's amazing. Okay, and I love the fact that you co-authored. I think sometimes when I speak to new authors, they, especially if they're writing on their own, they feel a little lost. But I think writing with a co-author is a great introductory into writing, and it opens doors for you now as an author, right? To go off on your own and write your own now, which is quite exciting as well.
Exactly. And I'm so excited. I've got an idea for a couple more books, but I have one percolating in my brain right now that I am really anxious to get started on. But now I sort of understand the process a lot more, and so it's going to be even easier this time to get going. It's just a matter of carving the time out in my calendar and making it happen.
Okay, so now let's jump into doctor's advice. We need a prescription from you on how we can live better, and like you go back to your, just giving out prescriptions all the time. There's got to be more to life than the next prescription. From your point of view, I would love to kind of get a little bit of wisdom from you that we can implement in our lives today as a listener to the podcast. Also funneling us back to the book, obviously, but I would love to get your wisdom for us on some practical things that we can do in our lives right now as listeners to live healthier and to get to more of the root of some of the things in our lives that can cause problems for us. Like, you talked about gut health, for example.
Yes.
But what are some of the things you're dealing with right now that might be applicable to somebody listening today? It's very wide, I understand, but
no, great question. I believe that our bodies are designed to feel amazing, and when they don't, there is a reason. And I think what happens, and this happened for me, I'm 48 years old right now. When I turned about 40, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't feel nearly as good as I used to, and then we've never been that age, insert whatever age you are currently today. And so we start to think, well, maybe this is just what life feels like at this age. Like maybe the best of my years have sort of passed me by. And while I don't think 50 is supposed to feel like 20, I think 50 is still supposed to feel pretty amazing. And, I think of health as sort of a continuum. So there is sick on one end, and then there's optimal health on the other end. But then there's a whole bunch of space in between. And I think in my old practice, what I did as a family doctor was I would do a physical on someone once per year. And if their cholesterol was normal and their blood pressure was normal, and I listened to their heart and lungs and looked in their ears and their throat, and that looked okay, I sent them on their way and said, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. See you next year. And they could have been in a big range on that curve.
Oh, yeah.
And so now I'm really focused on, okay, your physical is normal. Now what? What can we be doing to optimize your health? And I think when we're optimizing your health, we're doing two things. One is we're going to make ourselves feel better. So each day is going to be a little bit better because we're going to have more energy and feel more vibrant and alive. But we're going to also have this sense of this insurance policy that we're proactively doing something to prevent us from digressing more down to that sickness continuum. So we're kind of proactively preventing disease, but also trying to feel better in the process as well. And I do that by looking at some functional lab tests. But yeah, I look at adrenal health for all my patients. We look at gut health, and then we look at mitochondrial health. This is what I walk patients through. And most people that are coming to me, even after having a normal physical, have pretty significant issues in all of these areas. I consider them to be things that are happening beneath the surface. And so for adrenals, for instance, we are all stressed. Yeah. Even I've got a pretty good life. I really should have a lot less stress than a lot of people. But, I just, little things are stressing me out. Sometimes I'm worried about my kids' schedules and getting there where they need to be, and, getting the things that we need from the store before the birthday party, and all the different hats that I wear creates this little bit of a sense of stress in my body. And our bodies are not designed to handle that chronic, unremitting stress. And so I call that emotional stress, and we all have it to some degree. But then there's also some hidden stressors happening in our body too, coming from the gut and our diet and toxins and all these things. And it creates a burden on our adrenals. And when our adrenals are feeling the stress of that, our immune system becomes a little bit suppressed. Our sex hormones become imbalanced. Other secondary things happen from that keep us fine. I mean, we're fine. We're not dying, but we're just not feeling our best either. And so looking at that and optimizing it really makes people feel a lot better. And I consider it to be kind of a foundational piece before we move on to the gut. But then the gut is super important too. I mean, we have all this bacteria living in our gut. You know, there's good bacteria. Not all bacteria is bad. There's good bacteria, but then there's also this overgrowth of some bad bacteria that are creating inflammation, and they're, creating all kinds of havoc in the gut. And we can look at that and try to optimize that ratio of the good ones to the bad ones, and, introduce some probiotics and things like that, and some prebiotics, which are foods that feed the good gut bacteria. And so we can optimize the gut health. And then I also like to look at the mitochondria, which are the energy producers of the cell. That's how we produce energy. And they've often been, as we get older, they're not working as well because they're lacking the nutrients they need to function optimally. And sometimes they're just burdened by the toxins that we've been exposed to over our lifetime. That's just part of living in a modern day world. Like when we're 20, we've got enough stores of our glutathione and our precursors in our liver to wind those all up. But as we get older, the balance starts to get out of whack, and we start to see the effects of it. And so those are the things I look at with patients. But even without working with me, there's some simple things people can do on their own. I mean, you are what you eat. So that we're constantly rebuilding our bodies. And so we can either rebuild our bodies with McDonald's and Oreos, to give another shout out to those two, or we can rebuild our bodies with vegetables and lean proteins and healthy fats, so providing our body with those nutrients through our diet and through some supplementation. I think sometimes adding a little bit of supplementation, even if it's just multivitamin and a probiotic and maybe an omega-3 fish oil, can be really beneficial to almost anyone's health, because chances are we're not getting everything we need from our diet, right?
Sure.
And then working on the modifiable lifestyle factors too. I mean, those are so important, diet, exercise, sleep, mindset, the thoughts that we're telling ourselves every single day. And then the quality of our relationships. That's really, really important to our overall health as well.
That's a
lot. I know.
That's a lot, but it's a well-rounded picture, right? And to go back to what you've just given us is not a prescription for to take to the pharmacist. You're giving us a prescription for our life, right? You're giving us tools that we can use to be more active, be more healthy. And can you just expand a little bit more on sleep for us? Because I think that's one thing that we, I guess, in our culture and how busy we are, I'm thinking of maybe a mom who's up doing work all the time and the kids are always up early and you never get to full night's sleep, and how that can wear your batteries down over time. One thing I've heard people talk about is like sleep is kind of like an investment in a bank account, and you can't withdraw from a bank that's empty. So you have to input sleep to build that account up. Is that kind of right?
That is exactly right. And that is like the way we describe it in our book. I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I'm so glad you brought this one up, because I think sleep is often overlooked. We think about, diet and exercise seem to be like the two that everybody goes to when it comes to health. And I think sleep is one of the most undervalued things that you can do for your health. I talk to people, fatigue is like the thing I see people for the most. I mean, that is one of my specialty areas, is helping people manage fatigue. And that can be from mitochondrial ill health and adrenal ill health and hormones being imbalanced. But the thing that is the first thing to think about is, are you getting enough sleep? And, 7 hours sleep per night is the minimum you need for health, and sometimes people need more than that, but anything less than that, and yes, you're going to be tired because your body is not getting the restoration that it needs at nighttime. And, I used to be a person who, the biggest compliment you could have ever given me would have been like, man, that Libby is one tough, gritty gal, and like as a resident, we worked these really long hours and all night and into the next day. And I liked to brag about that. I thought it was pretty tough that I was able to do that. And I also like to brag about, going to bed late and getting up early because I'm such a hard charging gal that this is what I do. Right. Like this is kind of a, badge of honor in our culture in some ways. Right. And now I absolutely don't want to be that person. I want to be the person who does do exercise and does do hard things, but not at the expense of good sleep. And so you need quantity of sleep, minimum of 7 hours. And if someone comes to me and they're tired, I'm like asking them, like, are you getting 7 hours? Because if you aren't, this is the very first place that we need to start, And then also ensuring that sleep is high quality. How deep is the sleep that we're getting? And that's a little harder to sometimes to fix, but there are things that we can do. First of all, our body loves a consistent routine. Our body wants us to be going to bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every morning. When the thing that we're doing right before we go to bed is scrolling our phones, and looking at this is blue light that's kind of activating our brain and making it harder for us to fall into that deep sleep. And so putting that thing aside for an hour or so before bedtime can be really helpful to your sleep. Getting your room nice and cool and dark can be really helpful to your sleep. There are things that you can, and then like avoiding caffeine and avoiding alcohol can really impact the quality of your sleep too. Now, I'm a coffee drinker. I love coffee, but I try not to drink any caffeine after 2:00 in the afternoon. And alcohol, I'm not somebody who never drinks alcohol, but alcohol, it sort of sedates you. So you sometimes feel like you're sleeping better, but the quality of your sleep is actually worse. And so just being careful with how much alcohol we intake can really impact our sleep as well. But sleep is where your body restores itself, and it's so critically important.
I feel like this is the doctor's appointment I've always wanted. So this is amazing. This is so good. No, it's longer. It's longer than 5 seconds. I love this. This is great. So, okay, I'm so thankful you come on to talk about the book, talk about your journey, and just the information you're giving is just outstanding. And this is a podcast episode where you definitely have to go back and listen again. This is not a one-time listen. You have to go back and listen to Dr. Libby for sure. This is very important. But what is one thing maybe that we haven't really touched on as we kind of get close to wrapping up that is really important to you that maybe we just haven't touched on yet that kind of ties what we've been talking about together for the sake of our listener? What are we missing from the equation from our conversation?
Yeah. I think what comes to my mind when you ask that question, there's so many different ways it could go, but the thing that just really sticks out to me is doing something each and every day to let our body know it's not in danger. When we just get up early in the morning and we're at it and go, our body thinks we're being chased by a tiger. That's kind of how it's responding. And so stopping at some point during the day and doing something to signal your body that it is not. And that can be, doing a little meditation. That can be taking 3 to 5 deep breaths before you eat your meal. And then another thing that I like to work on when it comes to this is thinking about the thoughts that are going through my brain. We have these automatic default thoughts, right, that are telling us sometimes some really mean things. Like there's this roommate living in our brain that's telling us, you're not doing good enough. You shouldn't have said this. You should have done that. And, it can be like a real bully. But kind of thinking about that and how do you want to be talking to yourself, and really trying to be the encourager for ourselves. And I think doing some of that is one of the absolute keys to healing the adrenals. And healing the adrenals is foundational for so many other things. But it's that pause in the day. if you're being chased by a tiger outside, you are not going to stop and take 3 to 5 deep cleansing breaths before you eat your meal, right? Like that is not going to be happening. And so doing something to like tap into that, we call it the parasympathetic nervous system, that kind of just that calming part of our body that kind of helps to reset this. And so thinking about that, and then thinking about along with that, your mindset is there's no pill for that, but those small things can make an absolute huge difference in your overall health and just your overall happiness in life too. You know, that's kind of what the book is about. The book is not about just health. It's health and like a meaningful, purposeful life. But one of the things we thought about in the book is like, I used to have this life that I was trying to retire from. You know, like I couldn't wait to invest enough money so that I could one day like escape.
Yeah.
And now I want to have a life that I no longer want to escape from, like a life that I love now, but will also love into the future. And sure, I want to have the financial freedom to work less and travel more as I get older, but I want to have a job that I am not dying to get away from, because our life is now. It's not just in the future, it's now too.
I love it. It's so great. So, okay, Dr. Libby, how do people connect with you? How do we find you? Where are you most active? If I have a question for you, or I want to talk to you about working with you, where's the best place to find you? How do I do that?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. So I have an online business. It's called Best Life Functional Medicine, and you can find me at bestlifefunctionalmedicine.com. I am in Ohio, and so I have an online business where I work with patients all over the state of Ohio. I'm also licensed in Florida, so I can see patients from Florida one-on-one as well. But I have things to offer people who don't live in Ohio or Florida and don't want to necessarily work with me one-on-one, but want to learn from some of the things that I have to share. Okay. And so if you go to the website, there are other things too. I have an online adrenal program, like a do-it-yourself Fix Your Adrenals program that anyone can take. Of course, I have my book, which is available on Amazon. And then I recently opened a supplement shop where I have something called the Best Life Bundle. It's like, if you're wanting to DIY your own health and think, oh gosh, what couple of supplements should I take to ensure I'm getting the nutrients that my body needs? I've got a bundle that I've created for patients too. There's a quiz on there. Are you ready to work with a functional medicine doctor? And then I have a free Facebook group called the Best Life Challenge, where we take one health hack per month and focus on that. And then the next month we try another health hack. Small little things that can add up to big things over time.
Great. And we're going to put all that information in the show notes, because that is a perfect follow-up to our conversation. So I'm so thankful that you have that and you can offer that. I would encourage everyone, please go support Dr. Libby and all the great stuff that you're doing. Thank you for being part of the podcast. Really, really enjoy our conversation. I feel, again, inspired. I want to go eat something healthy. I'm going to go put the Oreos away. I'm not going to McDonald's today. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to get some sleep. I got so much homework to do. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that you had time to do this and to make time for us in your schedule. It's great. It's great to have you here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. And yes, it's, don't let health overwhelm you. It's just pick one or two things, master them, and pick one or two other things. And I tell people we think it's not working, right? Because sometimes you're doing something and you do it for several days in a row, several weeks in a row, and you feel like this isn't working. I'm not noticing any change. It is working. It's just we need that secret ingredient of time, the compound effect of time, to really see the results. And that's what we really tried to illustrate in the book with the two couples, Jake and Emma, and Bob and Carol, is that day to day, it didn't look that different, but then compounded over time, it makes a huge difference. But people it's so easy in today's world, right? We want the shiny object. We want it now. We're used to Amazon, next day delivery, and DoorDash, and all of these things. But true health just takes commitment and consistency and the secret ingredient of time. And so you don't have to be perfect, but more steps forward than backwards, and you're moving in the right direction. So if you don't know where to start with sleep. That's a big one.
We have our prescription. It's time to go. It's time to go live it. Thank you, Dr. Libby. It's awesome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
There we go. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Again, Thank you for subscribing and following. And you're listening this far in the podcast, so you are my best friend. I'm sorry, but you are now my best friend. So welcome. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. LivingTheNextChapter.com has a link on the website to our Facebook group. Are you on Facebook? Probably. You can go there and you can actually interact with our guests. You can talk to them. You can hear more about their journey, about their books. You can speak to them directly. You don't need me. You can come right over to LivingTheNextChapter.com, click on our Facebook link to our community. You can talk to other listeners of the podcast from around the world who are on Facebook. And, again, speak with our guests. Don't you want to speak to the guests you just heard from? Yeah, you can do that on Living the Next Chapter. Go over there. There's links to our Facebook group, and you're welcome to join. Thanks for listening.